Howdy everybody. Back again. My goal is to try to do one of these, once a week. I feel like that is a good goal for me to try to set for myself, so here I am once again. Hello. Back with my little round. It occurs to me that I didn't actually say what I was making this time around, but theoretically, this thing is going to end up being a cowl. A nice purple fluffy cowl. I know the cold months are almost over. By the time I get this done, it's probably not even going to be cold anymore, but it'll be something I made, and I can be proud of that. But I think instead of continuing to work on this time, I'm instead going to take this mess and make it into a ball, because I was working on this before, and I kept having difficulties with the yarn to the source being all like tangled up because this thing is such a mess. So, I don't know, who knows, maybe I'll talk long enough to be able to get back to the actual knitting. But, I think I should make this into a ball before I start to do that. That would make me the happiest. I don't know. But anyway, this week I have had 3 incidents that I think are probably notable. As far as processing things is concerned. The first one's a little fun. By the way, check out the description. I'll be putting the content notes there for you. So if you're easily triggered by certain things, just make sure you check the description first before maybe watching the video. Take care of yourself. It's okay to sit this one out if if the kind of content I'm gonna talk about is gonna trigger you at all. So take care of yourself. Drink water. But anyway, let's go. Right? So there, I think I said 3 things. 3 things. Yep, that sounds right. That I noticed this week, or that happened this week. And the first one is, I'll start with the least, but maybe go to the most. We'll see how that works out. But, I write music. I produce music. I put it out on the internet. When I infrequently finish things enough to be able to post them for other people's consumption. But right now, I'm working on a little EP or an album. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to be yet. Called DPDR, which stands for depersonalization and derealization, which are 2 facets of dissociation. And basically, just to give a super easy explanation of this thing, is depersonalization is when you look at your body and you don't feel connected to it. Like, oh hey, I'm, I guess, inhabiting this form, but it feels like a foreign form to me. That's depersonalization. Derealization is that same concept, basically, but for the external world, and not necessarily your own body. And it's like, oh, I'm living in a dream, I'm living in a fantasy world, that kind of thing. And I'm a person that deals with a lot of dissociation. It's one of those unhealthy coping mechanisms that for a long time I thought was a healthy coping mechanism, because back in the day I used to have very severe PTSD symptoms. I'd have panic attacks, night terrors, all that good stuff. And then I basically went on lockdown, and because those symptoms stopped, I had convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, but in reality, I was just learning to dissociate those things away. So I always kind of have this filter on between me and my experiences now. That is a basically dissociative barrier. And I was looking in the mirror the other day, which is not a good idea when you are dealing with severe depersonalization. And I had this just brainwave that the only time I've probably ever felt connected to my body and recognized it as mine is when I imagine being dead. Because, there's that whole thing that, when you die or whatever, it's like, oh, your spirit leaves your body. And there's a lot of like sci-fi or whatever about like looking down at your body as you leave it and go on towards whatever afterlife is happening. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's normal, that's fine, that's okay. That's a thing that normal people deal with. I try not to use words like, normal or whatever to downplay my own experiences or make myself feel bad. But that was one of those instances where it just came out. And I was like, all right, I need to really get on the ball as far as processing this thing, because I don't think a person who's living a healthy life thinks that the only way they can connect to the meat suit is by being a corpse. That is probably the source of, or at least a contributor to, the high amount of suicidality that I go through. It's like there's this thing in Hamilton where he's like, I imagine death so much it feels like a memory. I'm like, yep, most relatable content I've seen. Let's go, Lin-Manuel Miranda. Because it's like, that's honestly how it is, because I don't feel connected to a physical form at all. And it's a lot more severe than I had allowed myself to really realize. Wonderful. And I think a good step for me would be finishing this project. It's like a ambient record, basically, because nobody has any expectations of you when you make ambient music, am I right? I'll probably talk about my music trauma at another time, because I think about it constantly, but I don't really want to do that right now, given the other stuff that is going on. Sorry about that, but we'll get there. We'll get to it. We'll process it. It'll be good. So look forward to that, I guess. If you end up stopping by and you like music, I might, once it's done, drop it into the description or something, since I'm mentioning it here. But that was a realization I had that made me very uncomfortable. So I figured that could go in this little thing, so I have documentation of it. And I'm not really sure how to process something like that, because so much of how I have previously dealt with things and learned how to be functional was through basically shoving everything away and basically ignoring it, or making it so that I didn't have to look at the bad stuff anymore. Oh god, this thing is so tangled. Okay, I have the beginnings of a little ball. That's nice. I like that. That's very orderly. So yeah, that happened. I just lost my thread. Haha, punny. Anyway, I think I'll move on from that, because I'm not really sure what to do about it other than create this thing that I am creating. And I've made this now. I have said this in this format, so I'm now going to be able to hold myself accountable for actually sitting there and get it done. I talked to my roommate about it a little bit, and I had to explain, what depersonalization, derealization, whatever is. And I was like, yeah, there's no expectations for people to make ambient music, because it's just ambient music. But I personally know I'm doing it correctly when I'm sitting there with my DAW, making some sounds, and I listen back to it, and suddenly I've lost 10 minutes. So, yeah, that's the thing that happens. So I'll probably end up putting a trigger warning or something on the EP, album, collection of sounds, whatever, letting people know that if it's something that you also deal with, it might trigger that state for you. Also, I don't know if I said this or not, but I'm on my floor today. No particular reason for it. It just seemed like the right thing to do. I put some blankets down. I have a nice little comfy thing to sit on, even though it's a hardwood floor, and my feet are probably going to go to sleep over the course of making this. It's fine. It's totally fine. Anyway, on to the second thing. I've determined that I will not edit out those times when I get distracted, or say a lot, or stumble over my words, or when my stutter comes out, or any of that, because I think it's important to be able to show an authentic experience that I am having. And, you know, not just for anyone who might be watching this, but also for myself, because I filter myself entirely too much. I guess that goes along with the dissociation thing, because I have this, like, ideal of how I'm supposed to present myself to the world, and anything that I deem less than that, you know, like stuttering or stumbling over my words or forgetting what I'm talking about halfway through talking about it, anything like that is weak or something like that. And I really have a tendency of putting myself down for it. So in these, it might be the case that I film myself working on the whatever craft project I'm doing at the time. I might film that in advance and just do that for a really long chunk of time, and then like cut up the footage while I just monologue over it. But as far as the speaking goes, I am determined not to play the editing game to try to make myself look good or whatever, because that's not the point of this. And I figure the more authentic I allow myself to be, even on a YouTube channel that no one's ever gonna see, except me. Even then, I'm not gonna watch these again unless I'm feeling some kind of way. But I feel like the more practice I have just kind of being genuine, allowing myself to just ramble about these things, maybe the whole dissociation thing would cut down a little bit as a result. So anyway, second thing, a few days ago, I actually got triggered as shit, which is something that very rarely happens to me these days. Because of, you know, like I said, that unhealthy dissociative coping mechanism kind of puts a buffer between me and things that would otherwise trigger the shit out of me. But, coffee break. But, anyway, where I am, it's been getting kind of cold. Not super cold. I'm from a place that's way colder, but cold enough that it has been deemed appropriate by myself and my roommate that we turn the heat on, the artificial heating in the home. And, you know, that's fine. It's a comfort thing or whatever. Sometimes a necessity because it gets so cold that one can't feel one's toes anymore. But I am constantly dehydrated. Probably has to do with the fact that I drink coffee and not water all the time. But the dehydration plus the drying effect that the artificial heating has means that my sinuses get dried out a lot, and I get really prone to like sinus infections, and I get stuffed up, get nosebleeds, all that kind of crap. And you know, when that happens, when your sinuses are kind of out of whack, you start snoring, right? That's a perfectly normal human thing to happen. I understand why it happens. It's not a big deal. Most people at some point or another in their lives are going to snore. But the shitty thing that happened was I was taking a nap in the living room on the futon that we have in here. because I chronically have issues sleeping for a variety of reasons, and I'll get into that someday that's not today. I have other shit to talk about. But anyway, I was taking a nap, and my roommate knows that I am very particular about how I am awakened if someone else is gonna wake me up. Like, I get really freaked out if I'm asleep and there's a loud noise that happens. I'll like jump awake and I'll be a ugly mess for probably like 4 days after the fact. Or like if someone's like, I'm really difficult to wake up. I'm a very heavy sleeper. So if someone tries to touch me to get me to wake up, I freak out. If someone yells at me to wake up, I freak out. If someone throws something at me to wake me up, I freak out. And, this is something I've known about for a really long time. When I was a kid, the people who were my caretakers at the time were not great. You'll probably end up hearing a lot more about them as these go on. But one of the very many shitty things that they did was they demanded that I be silent at all times. They demanded that I be available at all times. They demanded I do whatever they told me, whenever they told me to do it. And, if I was sleeping and they needed something, they expected me to awaken immediately when called and just to hustle and bustle it up there and get them whatever they needed. And so I have a lot of really specific things that bother me if I'm sleeping and something tries to wake me up. It's a pretty delicate situation. For me, I haven't unpacked all of that yet. But anyway, going back to a few days ago, I was taking a nap and I asked my roommate, like, hey, can you just like wake me up sometime in a couple of hours? I don't want to take one of those naps that ends up being like a whole ass 8 hours, because like that would ruin my sleep schedule more than it already is. And I am trying, dadgummit, to get back on track, And so they were like, okay, I can do that. Let's set up a time. And my roommate has a lot of practice at doing this, so I'm like, I can be reasonably assured that I'm not going to be triggered as shit when you go to wake me up, because we've talked it out and we've decided that the best course of action to wake me up is to basically just try to have a conversation with me. Just start talking to me, because I'll be like, what the fuck are you saying? And I'll just be like, what? But it has to be sufficiently engaging or I'm just gonna ignore it. I don't know. It's a mess to try to wake me up. But so I'm like, okay, this is good. I'm gonna take a little nap. Everything's gonna be fine. I'm gonna wake up. We're gonna watch Jeopardy. Maybe make some dinner. It'll be a good time. This time, my sinuses are all jacked up because of the artificial heating and everything that I already just talked about. And they came out to wake me up, and I was oblivious to the world for a little while, and then I just hear them laughing hysterically and being really fucking loud, and I just I wake up immediately. My eyes are just open. And I'm like, what's going on? What's wrong? What's happening? Am I being summoned? That whole thing just kind of got awakened with me. And they, did the thing, you laughing really hard at something that's really funny. And then you, try to talk, that was going on. And eventually they spit it out that it's wow, you were snoring so hard that I've been trying to get you to wake up for 8 minutes. And you just weren't able to hear it because you're snoring so loud. That's so funny. and just kept fucking laughing. And I'm like, I was so triggered by this. Like, I'm still like kind of half asleep, but my little thing is activated where like I am being summoned. I need to be awake and conscious. So I sat bolt upright and I looked at them, and in my half asleep kind of state, I was looking at them, and I just saw these like black particles like flying around their head. And in that moment, they truly looked to me like they were fucking Satan. And I'm just like, I can't deal with this. And they must have seen the look of horror on my face or something, because I couldn't speak. When it comes to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, I'm very much a freeze and a fawn. So I was just like, just sitting there looking horrified at them. And they, stopped laughing. And they're just like, okay, you're awake now, so it's all good. Ha ha ha, joking, whatever. I guess I don't know, they didn't fully register what was going on. And I laid back down and I just covered my head with a fucking blanket and started like trying not to hyperventilate. And they just start going on about some inane shit. It's like, oh, they're still waking up. We need to do the normal thing where we just try to have a conversation, and then they'll, be awake and everything will be fine and dandy. They brought me like a coffee and stuff. And like after, I don't honestly know how long, I just like interrupted them. And I was like, no, I'm not trying to wake up anymore. I am wide fucking awake right now. I have been triggered as hell by the fact that you woke me up by making fun of me. And that's like, as childish and inane as that might seem, like that's actually a huge thing for me. First of all, I can't stand being humiliated by another person. It usually doesn't bother me if someone tries, because I know better. I know my self-worth. I have a pretty good amount of self-confidence when it comes to interacting with other people, but like specifically humiliating me to wake me up is just something that I can't deal with. I can't. It is a trigger. It is a full-on trigger for me, and this is one of those that was so surprising that I couldn't immediately dissociate out of it and just pretend like it didn't happen. It was just this overwhelming feeling of dread and anger and sadness, and I was having flashbacks, and it's like, how do you communicate with that with a person in the moment? And I did my best. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but it wasn't as mean as usually happens when I'm triggered, and I'm glad that I've made that progress at least. But I said it, and they were like, "Oh shit, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I wasn't trying to make fun of you. It's just one of those things. It's like." You notice it's happening, and it's just like super funny. It's not meant to be like a dig at you or anything. And I'm like, I understand. Like, I know you're not just like some horrible person who's trying to train me to be a more effective servant for you or anything. Like, I understand. I'm usually pretty aware of what's going on and who's around me. I know, I get it. It doesn't change the fact that this is a super fucking triggering thing, And I silently cried for like an hour while we put on fucking Jeopardy, because I'm just like, I can't talk to you about this. You don't get it. Like, it's just one of the things like non-traumatized people be like. Like, they just take it so personally when they trigger you, It's like, I understand that it's not your fault that I have been triggered. I understand that what you're doing is a quote-unquote normal person thing to do, and that my reaction to it is not something that you could have, should have expected to happen. But it remains that the reaction is happening. That it remains that I am actually suffering right now, and I could use some support rather than you being all defensive about it because I reacted in a way that you don't understand. Anyway, that's... Why am I censoring that? I'm so used to not being able to rant about that I just kind of cut myself off about it. Anyway, I dealt with it in the way that I could in the moment, which I understand wasn't great. I should have pushed forward and tried to talk it out constructively rather than really attempting to stifle my flashbacks and hiding under a blanket and doing my best to silently cry while my roommate didn't know that anything else was going on. I know, hindsight is what it is. I didn't do that at the time. I kind of regret that. But as I was attempting to shove all that away and just watch some motherfucking Jeopardy, I, was thinking, like, why do I still have a problem with this? Why is this something that's bothering me this many years later? Like, I know, like, rationally that that's not something I have to deal with anymore. It's just not a part of my life. I've actually created a place for myself that is so far away from any of that it just doesn't make sense that it would affect me so profoundly now. It just doesn't. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to realize that my biggest issue, especially regarding, the whole being made fun of thing, while I was, like, sleeping or whatever, or there being some big joke about me while I'm sleeping. This also, comes back to, like, sometimes people like to take, like, photos of sleeping people, and they're like, haha, you look so funny when you're asleep. Like, that kind of thing is in this camp for me. And the long and short of it, I came to realize, is that when I am asleep, I cannot consent to being part of the joke. If I do something goofy while I'm awake and, like, hanging out with people or whatever, it's like, yeah, I can get embarrassed when I do something silly and someone calls me on it and then laughs at me in that way or something. And, like, it's still, the humiliation of it still kind of bothers me. But I understand that that's a quote-unquote normal reaction to have. Like, it's like, oh, this is embarrassing, whatever, let's move past it. And, like, that's all well and good. I have no problem at this point in my life dealing with that kind of, like, friendly humiliation, embarrassment, whatever. But it's specifically if it happens while I'm asleep, like, I am not consenting to this. And that's just really the root of it. I can't. And I feel like it's hard to say that to people who don't have the experience of having their consent disregarded or not even asked for in the first place. Because, like, they're like, oh, consent is just for, like, sex and romantic stuff, right? Or, like, there's this burgeoning awareness that it's like, you should be asking for consent for stuff like hugs also. But there's still just that element of, like, romantic gestures or whatever that are the things that require consent. But in actuality, it really should go to all aspects of one's life. You should not, like, force someone to be part of a scheme, a joke, a conversation, anything, without making sure that they're okay with it. And that's something that I really struggle to enforce with friends, family members, coworkers even sometimes, is that, like, I am very good at this point of managing my own triggers and not making someone else responsible for them when they happen. Because I understand that my perspective is a little different than most other people that I'm going to come into contact with. But I am still allowed to set boundaries that will ensure that I'm not put in a situation where I feel like I have to just sit there and silently cry and process and push back flashbacks while, we're just trying to watch Jeopardy or something, and if one of my boundaries is do not make jokes or recordings or anything that has to do with me sleeping, then, that's okay. I should be able to say that to somebody and have that be respected. That comes to bear in a lot of different aspects of my life that I find hard to enforce, where it'll be like, it was such a... Actually, no, I'm not going to say that. That is triggering for the sake of being triggering, and I'm not going to include that here. But the long and short of it is I had this huge brainwave moment about the nature of something that has been bothering me for a very long time. And I have the language now to comprehend what I should do about it to prevent it from happening in the future. And the preventative measure that I've come up with, meaning setting boundaries and enforcing boundaries assertively, isn't my normal run-of-the-mill thing of just letting people do whatever they want and then suffering silently about it and then dissociating the experience away. So it's good to be able to name things. It's good to be able to recognize what they are. And I feel like I did that about this thing. And it's like, that doesn't mean, it's suddenly not going to bother me anymore and that people can do this, that, or the other thing. But it does mean that I have a better means of communicating that to people in my life whom it may affect. And I think that's pretty good. But yeah, it was a mess for a number of days. And look at that, I've been talking for half an hour and I finished my bowl. I think, however, I'm going to take a break from dealing with this yarn because that was actually exceptionally frustrating. So I'm going to take a small break from that and drink some coffee while I continue to talk about the third thing. Also, I was definitely right. My feet are falling asleep. I am struggling. Oh, also that's my microphone. You can see it in the frame. I gotta figure out how to move and not kick the camera over, or the microphone over, or kick my laptop screen and break it. Creative problem solving with Elle. What up? Alright, that's fine. I'll just readjust a little bit. So the last one is kind of the worst one. Not gonna lie. Oh my god, I'm looking at the wave of me speaking, and I really should probably put this microphone farther away from me. Because whenever I rest my chin on my hand like that, my levels peak so much. I'll probably run that through a compressor and see if it does anything to help even it out, because I'm not trying to hurt y'all's ears. Anyway, alright, last thing on the docket. Look at me, saving the heaviest for last, and I'm already exhausted from talking so much. You know what? I will do something with my hands while I'm talking about this. That will help me. So, I'm making this cowl, and I'm following this pattern that I found online. If there's any interest, if anybody ends up watching this, I'll put a link in the description or something. Where's my pattern? Oh no, did I lose it? No. Okay. I'm just gonna open up my browser. You guys shouldn't see that because it's running through my webcam and not my laptop screen. Oh good, I do still have the web page open. Okay, let's download this again. So I can open, please, oh pretty please. I think I'm at a point where I've made the base of it, the base ring. So I think it's basically just like I knit 2, purl 2 for a really long time, to kind of build it up a little bit. Let me make sure that is the case though. Knit 2 rounds, did that. Rounds 3 through 27, I'm not gonna count the rounds. I'm just gonna eyeball it so it looks like the picture. Knit 2, purl 2, repeat brackets until end of round for 2x2 rib. Okay. The rest of it's in a garter stitch. Okay, so I'm basically just gonna knit 2, purl 2 for a really long time, and I'm just gonna knit for a really long time, and then I'm gonna bring it together a little bit. Sounds good. Sounds like I can just do that. There it is. Okay. Anyway, the third thing. This has to do with one of my big traumas, trademark. And yeah, again, you know, I put content notes in the description. So definitely make use of those. But when I was a teenager, I was subjected to domestic violence at the hands of a paternal abuser. And it was pretty rough. This is one of those things where my sleep was interrupted by a sudden loud noise and a confrontation. So, you know, that's part of the reasons why thing number 2 from this week bothered me so badly. But basically, I was woken up in the middle of the night, and the paternal abuser had a weapon and used it against my mom. And I was very fortunate that I wasn't struck in any way at this time. But it was just a whole ass episode of stuff. He was on drugs. Oh god, I've already immediately... Okay. I immediately lost the plot for this thing. Dissociation makes you forget where you're at in your knitting pattern. Even when it's just a knit 2, purl 2. But anyway, there's a bunch of horrible shit. And he eventually passed out from the amount of drugs in his system. And warned us not to call the police or else bad things, trademark. And so my mom told me that she was going to go out to the car to look for something that he had been demanding during his tirade. And I was just like sitting on the couch, totally like paralyzed, because like I said, my fight, flight, freeze, or fawn tends to be freezing and fawning, and I kind of hate that about myself, but you know, whatever. So she's like, all right, I'm gonna go do this, so you know, when he wakes up, that's one less thing we have to worry about. I'll be right back. And I'm just like sitting there, like waiting. And like, it feels like an eternity goes by. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should just go help. This would be the best thing to do. We'll get it done twice as fast, and then we'll go back home, and we'll just like huddle together, and I don't know. We'll figure it out. So I went out to the car, and she wasn't at the car. So I started really freaking out at that time. And she had actually gone to like the landlord to ask for help because we seriously needed help. She was all like injured and shit. I can imagine what that looked like when she went up to their door. But anyway, the landlord was walking down my street, and he had been coming to collect me because she had left me in the house by myself while she went to go seek help, and saw me just like freaking out in the street. And they got me to their house. My mom was there. They made me some tea. They're all very nice about it, at least initially, but the rest of that's a story for another day. But yeah, they called the police, who then arrested the paternal abuser. And there was this whole thing with like, they called forensics people in. They had like the whole 9 yards of people, like police officers and crew investigating a violent crime scene that was my house. So they were like, taking photos of my mom, getting her statement, all that kind of shit. And I'm just sitting there like with my tea, like, when are they going to ask me? I have things to say. I was there. I want to contribute. And like, I was a teenager at the time. I was a young teenager, but not really a child anymore. And I was aware enough at that time because, dissociation started happening. So I was feeling pretty, focused, kind of. I wasn't having a panic attack anymore. And I was sitting right next to my mom as the police officer was asking her some questions. And she was freezing. She had done her flight, response. And, she was getting poked at and prodded at by these people who were trying to photograph the wounds on her body. And she was trying to talk to this police officer while all of that was happening. And she was just locking up, and she was not able to give the information that this police officer was asking of her. So I kept trying to help, and I saw that she was struggling, and I was just starting to get my words back and everything. And this police officer barks at me, a freshly traumatized teenager, by the way. It's like, we'll get to you in a minute. And you know what? He never did. They never asked me shit after that. And I don't know, after that we were transported to the domestic violence shelter. Some time passed. It was like a month. I didn't register that it had been a month. Because, dealing with a very recent trauma. And my mom just sits me down to talk to me, and she's like, she was really freaked out. And I'm like, what's going on? And she told me that they had let the paternal abuser out of jail a week ago, and no one had told her. And I'm like, what? I was very, very angry to hear this. And, as an adult now, I recognize that response may have been very triggering to her, but to her credit, she did very well at dealing with it in the moment. I was very upset, and I want to know who had the audacity to do that? Who was in charge of that? Why did it happen? I had so many questions, right? And she told me something to the effect of it just timed out, basically, because in the state we were in, you're only allowed to keep someone in jail without a trial for a certain amount of time before you let them out, and that had just happened. And I was like, well, have they, given you information about where, this person is? Or, like, where exactly they let him out? And she's like, nope, I'm still trying to figure that out. And it was just this whole thing. But I was thinking about this, because I was really triggered by the sleep thing. It just popped into my brain, and I started thinking about it too much, probably. And so I looked up the public record, because you can do that. You can look at arrest records most of the time online, most of the time for free. That is your right. So for any of you who might have an abuser out there who has a record, or if you're trying to see is currently in jail or something, you can do that if you know where they are. You can put in an inmate request online most of the time and know if they're currently arrested or not. Anyway, I looked at the record for that, and I was like, what is the reason that they give for acting that way? Because in my mind in that moment, it just it wasn't really adding up or anything. And I looked at, so it looks like it's a big table, right? And it has like the person's name, aliases, race, gender, height, all that kind of stuff about them. And then underneath it is what they were charged with, what it's classed as, and then what actions were taken relating to the charge. And the result, so where it would say went to court on this day or whatever, it just says no information. And I'm like, excuse me? Is that just how they put it in to say oh, it timed out or whatever? Do they just say is that just the code for that? Because bureaucratic stuff, sometimes codes don't make any sense. So I did a Google, as any good millennial would do, and to look up what the code words no information meant in that state. And it turns out that perhaps my mom as well, I don't know, were misinformed about what had happened. Because no information doesn't mean that it timed out. It doesn't mean that they just didn't get him in court in enough time and they had to let him out. No, in that state, if one is put in jail and charged with a misdemeanor, there's something like 60 days for it to go to court before the person is just released. For a felony charge, like the one that the paternal abuser had, that's up to 90 days. It was something like 29 days after the arrest date that this person was let out. And apparently no information is when the prosecutor for the case, the person who would be bringing it to court, it's no information is something they have to specifically file for, because when a case goes to the state, to the county, to the whatever, to the prosecuting office, they have to look at all the information they have about the crime that has occurred, about the perpetrator and everything. And they have to decide if it would be worth it for the prosecutor's office to take the case to court. This is especially like for just criminal cases. I'm not sure about civil cases or anything like that. But when they code no information for a case, it means either charges were initially filed and dropped, so there's just no case anymore, or the prosecutor finds that there is not enough substantial evidence to be able to carry a case to court and then proceed to win the case against the offender. And, looking at that, my mind is boggled by that because, like I said, at the scene, there were photographers. They had the whole kit and caboodle for us there because, there was a deadly weapon involved. There were injuries, so there were like EMTs, there were crime scene photographers, there were like 3 police cars full of police officers. They actually had like an entire team of cops go into my house and arrest the guy. This was like, it was a big deal. There was evidence. The cop that was very rude to me did get a testimony from my mom, and I distinctly remember him asking her if she wanted to press charges, and she was like, "Of course I do. Do you not see my face?" And I just like, when I learned all this stuff, I started having this loop go on in my brain, which happens sometimes. I just get stuck in a loop and keep like repeating the same phrase or something over and over and over and over and over and over and over until I like process it or whatever, I guess. And I was just like, would it have been no information if I had been allowed to speak? Why didn't they allow me to speak? Because like, there's a thing in that state. I looked this up after the whole no information revelation. I looked it up and like, oh, is there just like some law in place that says that like children can't testify in like criminal cases or something? Because that kind of makes sense. And apparently there has been legislation that encourages the courts to, when possible, avoid demanding a testimony from a child. It gets a little, like, from what I was reading, it gets a little blurry when the child is a teenager, but in everything I read about it, it said that exceptions can and should be made in case of an emergency or violent crime in which the child is the only witness. And so, my mom was a witness, I was a witness, but we were the only witnesses. So it's like they should have asked me. Someone should have talked to me. Someone should have heard what I had to say. And in my mind, I'm just like, is this a failure on the side of the state and the prosecutor's office? Or, was my mom just so checked out at the time that she didn't end up doing all the bureaucratic bullshit she needed to do to be able to formally press charges and like make the statements and like go to the police station and do this, that, and the other thing? Like, was there something that she needed to do that just didn't get done because we were, both severely traumatized and trying to navigate this domestic violence shelter that we were thrust into? Like, because I know, like, over the course of that month, she spent a lot of time trying to make sure I was okay, and I was not receptive to that. I wasn't eating, I was dissociating a lot, I was argumentative with the people who worked at the shelter who were trying to talk to me. and they were saying some dumb shit. Like, how do you feel about this? I'm like, how the fuck do you think I feel about this? Like, what? Yeah, what? And it was a time. So, like, if there was something that she was supposed to do that she just didn't do, whether it was because she didn't know she had to do it, because those cops were not communicative at all about what was going on. Like, no one told her anything. She had to find out on the internet that this, like, no information thing had even happened. And I'm just like, I started down, when I started thinking about this very recently, I started down this path of being very, very angry at the police officer who said, "We'll get to you later," because they never did. And maybe that would have made the difference, because in the state where all of this happened, there is, for violent felonies, especially those involving a minor, there is mandatory minimum sentencing for this kind of crime. And, mandatory minimum for this thing would have been like 15 years or something, And, like, maybe even because there's also in this state a 3 strikes law, and this person had definitely had more than 3 strikes in the legal system for various drug and whatever charges, because this person has an extensive criminal record, and a lot of which are violent. So, like, maybe that would have carried a life sentence, And, like, I'm a compassionate person. I don't like the thought of people being put in a box for the rest of their life. But holy crap, I have seen real evil, and this person is emblematic of some kind of real evil, and that is the kind of person for whom I think those punishments are appropriate. But I just keep thinking about it, and I keep being so mad at this fucking police officer who promised me a chance to speak and then never gave it to me. And then it's like, bundled in with that a little bit. It was the kind of sensationalized crime, violent crime that newspapers really like. So there actually still exists a local newspaper which published an article about this event in my life and uses our names and like our address at the time and all of that crap. And it used to be good because I used to not be able to talk about this at all, and people would be like, what are you freaking out about? Like, what's going on with you? And I would just be like, this happened, and I would just link them to the article because it's on the internet. And they would be like, holy shit, dude, I'm uncomfortable talking to you now. But then, like, after I processed it to a certain point, it started to dawn on me just how inappropriate it is that such a personal part of our lives, such a traumatic part of our lives, was used for clickbait without our consent. Like, nobody from the paper contacted us and asked us if they could spray our personal information around the internet like that. So I contacted the writer and their manager. I made a huge email about it. I'm like, hey, I'm in this, and you're violating my rights by putting this up. And they basically said, fuck you, we do what we want. It's staying up. Sorry you experienced this, but something journalism. And, it's just another instance where it's like, I did not consent to this. I did not consent to be used in this way. Why are you people taking the power of my narrative away from me? Why do you feel so entitled to have control over what I do or do not choose to disclose. And it's just like, I do this thing when I'm talking about my trauma where I try really hard to water it down for the people I'm talking to, because I'm very used to having to comfort other people about my trauma just for having the audacity to mention it. And I don't really vibe with that anymore, you know? Like, in these videos or whatever, like, I'm making a conscious effort to put like content notes and trigger warnings on content, because I understand that the wider population of the internet, it's like, they're going to be traumatized people who are going to find these videos and they're going to try to find something helpful in it for themselves. And I don't want to be responsible for triggering them, because I understand what it is to be triggered by this stuff. But like, people who have not gone through trauma insisting that me talking about my trauma is traumatic to them is bullshit. But then it's like, you have people like the newspaper, the writer who made that article, who are like, we're going to tell your story for you. We're going to privilege the abuser in it. And we're not going to listen to you when you say you want your story to be told this way. Like, then you have the police officers who are saying, you don't count as a person, we're not going to listen to your story, even though we told you we were going to. And it's just like, there are just so many weird, complicated social things that go into something as simple as saying, this is my story. This is how I want it to be put out into the world. And it's like, just having choices stripped away from you is like, it's just not fair. And I've been doing my best this week to come to terms with my feelings about these things. And, you know, for this last thing where I'm like, oh, I'm fixating on the fact that I never got to tell my story. I don't think there's a solution for that, you know? I'm trying really hard to be able to find those words for myself and share them, I guess, in this way, through this medium. But it's like, I know that is a moment I will never get back. That is a situation where my power was taken from me by those who were supposed to help lift me up. And I have dealt with so much uncertainty and so much fear in the years after that, directly because of that. Like, as far as I know, this guy's still alive. As far as I know, this guy's still traipsing about where we left him. And it's like, I have no way of knowing where he might be, where he might emerge. I have no idea if, you know, maybe he got COVID and he's not around anymore. That would be comforting. But it's just like, if things had worked the way they were supposed to work, and he had been charged and convicted because there was material proof that these things happened, then, like, he'd still be in prison right now. Like, I could just be like, oh, still in prison? There you go. I feel safe. But that's something that was taken away from me because I wasn't allowed to speak. But I don't know. That's basically what's going through my mind this week. I'm looking at my I'm looking at my recording, and it's saying that this is over an hour long now, just over an hour. And I didn't realize that I would be able to even talk about this stuff for that long. But interesting. But like I said, in the future I'll probably just record the actual craft part that you guys probably can't see anyway, in much longer chunks and just kind of monologue over the footage. Because sometimes I just really want to knit. And sometimes that's at like 4 o'clock in the morning when my roommate is asleep and I can't just like monologue about trauma while I'm knitting at that time. So, I don't know. This is, I've done 1 round in that time, but I also made the ball, and I think that's pretty good. I think that's an accomplishment for now anyway. But, cheers, everybody. See you in the next one. Hopefully a week from now, sometime.